Oh, we're live. Hi, Mike. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Hi, Grace. Thank you for having me.
To start the show, I would love for the audience to learn more about you. So, obviously, you have started a fantasy sports company in the past, and like later on, you have been a partner at a top recruiting firm, and then you recruited for Facebook slash Meta, and now you're a partner at SignalFire. Why don't we start with what were some kind of like core lessons you've learned in your founder era that you have took to be a partner at SignalFire?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay, so I'll go back to the foundation of what was then the National Sports Exchange. And the basis behind this idea was I grew up trading baseball cards. As I started to, evolve and get older, I questioned the idea of the intrinsic value of a piece of cardboard with a picture on it and some statistics on the back. Obviously, the value is a function of supply and demand. And so as one does, they come up with ideas. I was sitting around with some friends and I thought to myself, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense why this piece of cardboard has this necessary intrinsic value. I could probably digitize that and create an exchange where I could trade this stuff in real time. And so that was the birth of this idea of a stock exchange to trade equity in professional athletes. There's a whole lot that I learned from that experience as one does as they're going through trying to build a consumer internet business during arguably the hardest time in history to do so. This was right after the first dot-com bubble, the dot-com bubble. And so it was very difficult to raise money. It was very difficult to recruit people and get them, on the boat to build this thing that you had this very strong conviction and vision for. I was fortunate to find some wonderful co-founders that I wound up moving in with, and we basically spent 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, building and iterating and ideating on all of the things that were related to this concept that we had. We built all sorts of unique proprietary software at the time. Looking back at the experience, we probably built some technology that we could have sold unto itself. One of the things that we had built was a real-time streaming of prices as games were happening. There was a dynamic changing of price at that time in the internet. That was a novel thing. There were no other places that you could do that. So we were very clever in trying to solve problems through coming up with ideas, coming up with solutions that we felt were going to enable us to take this business to the next level. What I learned specifically, and probably most importantly from the experience, was two things: recruiting, which I know we're going to talk a bunch about on this podcast, and then also just the value of having a semblance of technical capability. If you're going to solve a technical problem, you should probably have a technical background in some capacity. And so I can get into that more with you and how I learned that and ultimately what my takeaways were. But those two were the biggest.
I love that. I totally feel like, the startup is technically as good as the people in the company. And I feel like, having technical capability is extremely important as a person who slash founder who have like tried to start a tech company. I definitely feel like knowing some sort of technical terms that you can communicate with the engineering team is like extremely important. But why don't we start there? Like, I want to learn from you on, like, since you have built, the stream pricing or like all the proprietary technology coming from, I feel like you're more towards like the business background, browsing through your resume slash sports background, but like it's less of like technical, like, the Silicon Valley people, everybody's like a CS major or something. How do you like educate yourself, and like how do you evaluate people's technical ability, and how, like, how do you like, how does that translate into building a startup?
Now or then?
Both. We could also talk about how it evolves.
Okay. I don't want to bore your audience with all these anecdotal quips of history, but I'll start there. What I learned was, when you have ideas and you want to see them come into fruition, to your point, you have to be able to speak a certain degree of the language and communicate the specifics of what you're trying to accomplish. Now, that was how it worked before. In the age of AI and where things are going over the next 10 years, I'm not so sure that adage is going to remain the same. It seems like, in the future, you'll just kind of say what you want built and communicate with natural language and just have that thing get built. So I feel like my advice or my anecdotes here are going to be a little bit dated. However, I do feel like it's important to understand the fundamental technical challenges that you're faced with in building a business. You're a product person, so you know firsthand that when you have an idea, you're trying to do something, that idea is probably not unique. You're probably not the first person that came up with that idea. You won't be the last person that comes up with that idea. And ultimately what it comes down to is your ability to execute. And so you've read this, you've heard this 100,000 times, I'm sure. But it couldn't be more true in the sense that your ability to out-execute your competitors, your ability to out-execute the incumbents, your ability to out-execute anybody else who might be thinking about doing this general thing is what ultimately is going to be a key differentiator for your success. And in the context of execution, your ability to put your hand, for me at least at the time, the ability to put hands on keyboard and commit code to actually build the thing that you have inside of your head is paramount versus communicating a vision to a group of highly technical, highly intelligent individuals. The degree with which that is going to get you to the point that you're trying to get to in the time that you're looking to get there, your probabilities are pretty low. And so, at the time I learned that firsthand. The advice that I would give people now, is have ideas, iterate on all sorts of things, but recognize that there is no one size fits all. You're going to get quips from, people on how to do X, Y, or Z. Usually there's kernels of truth embedded in there, but at the end of the day, you hear folks talking about forces of nature and sort of the intrinsic personality traits that exist inside of people that just kind of make things happen. And so I would say that that's probably the most important thing to focus on is recognizing whether you do or don't have that personality and that skill set, intrinsically in your DNA. And then everything from there kind of stems out, and every little box that you can check is going to probably increase your probability of success. So if you have an enterprise product that has high degrees of technical complexity, you probably want to have a technical background. If you're selling a widget where it's a consumer product and you're selling it to, the direct to consumer space, you probably don't need to have a technical background. So it's like, it's kind of like case dependent. And that's a kind of a long-winded answer to your question around like, how would you apply what I've learned into today? Hopefully that's a little bit of anecdotal advice.
For sure. I like what you said about like recognizing if you kind of like have the intrinsic DNA to like pull off a certain skill, and then recognizing what you don't, what is a skill that you need to like, I guess like have on your team is like also very important. I wonder when you were thinking about like, back in time at like True Partner, like, so like as a partner, how do you think about like researching the executive talent? And what does that mean for like, for example, I'm sure you guys have like all different type of clients compared to your time at Facebook. Like, how do you think about like sourcing talent at scale in general?
Mm-hmm. Well, sourcing talent at scale and the things that I learned growing up in the recruiting world, I would say are two completely separate things. So I'll start with the executive recruiting component, and then I'll kind of dovetail into scaling recruiting. So like most people, I fell into recruiting. It wasn't something that I sought. It wasn't something that I specifically wanted to do with my career. What I did find was that similar to the experience that I was just describing to you, I didn't have the classic background to get myself wedged into venture capital. I had the founder background in a sense, but I wasn't technical. I didn't graduate from an Ivy League school. I didn't have some of the just classic profile components, especially during the time period where I was trying to break into the industry. And so the way that I figured it out was, I started by working with Chris Farmer, the founder of SignalFire, who had a grandiose vision to be the most value-added investor on a founder's cap table and to build a venture capital firm where that was the central sort of mantra, the central thesis to how we were going to succeed. So I bought into that. And at that time, what he needed was somebody to build out a recruiting capability for the add-on component to being valuable to a founder. And so I started recruiting. And like anything, I sunk my teeth, right into it. I didn't want to be a failure. So I spent 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, kind of learning how to be a good recruiter, how to be a good assessor of talent. It didn't take very long. Turns out recruiting is not rocket science. And really what it's a function of is, this will dovetail a little bit into the scaling piece, but what I learned there is pattern recognition is a very key component to recruiting. And pattern recognition you can see within someone's resume, or you can see it on their LinkedIn profile. These are things that I describe them as breadcrumbs. Everybody leaves breadcrumbs throughout their career, and the decisions that they make, the time that they make them, the places they go, and the things that they do are all indications of that person and their personality and their risk tolerances and the places that tend to work for them and the things that they tend to like to do. And so recognizing that early on, I was able to kind of like hone in on the components of pattern matching that would enable me to be a sought out recruiter, a top recruiter within this industry. And so that's kind of what I started doing. And that's kind of how I made my initial foray into venture capital. What wound up happening there was we had an opportunity to merge the recruiting component with True, who at the time was a small, like, fledgling recruiting firm, 8 partners at the time. And my opportunity there was to join and to build out the West Coast presence. It was me and a couple of other folks at the time, where our job was to build the West Coast, business for True. It was great. Had an opportunity there to work with a number of different tier 1 venture firms and kind of get a peek inside as to how they thought, how they assessed talent, how they went about recruiting, how they viewed certain components of backgrounds, and how that mapped to my thinking as well. And that just kind of continued to hone things. I won't go through my whole background. Maybe if you'd like to do that, we can do that at another point. But to answer your question into how to dovetail that into how to scale recruiting, you scale recruiting by understanding what it is that you're looking for and how to find those things. So back to the pattern matching piece, your ability to deconstruct what it is that you're looking for, where these people come from, what they've done, what are the breadcrumbs that they've left that give you an indication that these are people that you'd like to recruit. To the degree that you can codify that, there's plenty of AI, there's plenty of search algorithms, there's plenty of systems that are out there that will help you to fill your top of funnel to, like, here's 1,000 people that fit that general criteria. To me, that's how you scale recruiting. First is knowing exactly what you're looking for. That comes from interviewing the best people who are doing that thing today and taking adages, taking little what do those breadcrumbs look like? And then mapping them to the things that you're trying to solve for. So I think that's a core component to scaling recruiting. And then kind of to go backwards, and sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I did spend a little bit of time working with the senior leadership team at Facebook. What I learned there was the incredible emphasis and importance on leveraging your people to find the best people. When I was at Facebook, it was 8,000 people, and 50% of their net new recruits came from internal referrals. So, think about that for a minute. At 8,000 people, 4,000 people in that first year came from internal referrals. And that statistics holds generally today still. And so the emphasis and the value that one places, especially founders place on making sure that the first cohort of people that you hire are absolutely rock stars, like A+ players, and they recognize the importance of recruiting in terms of how that leverages their time, how that enables them to find success and scale their business. It's just this domino effect. And so, scaling is a function of knowing what you're looking for, how to leverage the systems to appropriately manage and systematize your funnel, and then also leveraging your people to really kind of like fill in that last mile of hiring the best of the best.
I really like some of the things that you mentioned about like pattern recognizing and everybody leaves like breadcrumbs in their like resume to like help you identify them. And you mentioned about like how you identify people. It's like you will interview like whoever is doing a good job today. Maybe can you walk us through like your day to day at SignalFire? Or maybe I feel like maybe now it's very different than like years ago, but maybe when you first starting, what was your first week like? How do you, how do you first of all like getting the best person to talk about something to you, or do you spend like let's say like 5 hours talking to different founders and then trying to understand their needs? How do you really take notes on like identifying what are the things that they need? Just because I feel like that's just really hard because the founders probably don't know what they need to a degree. Basically tell us more about like, how do you function as like helping the founder to grow? And then we can jump into like building that practices later, just because I feel like that's a different kind of like subsector too.
Yep. Okay, great. I was brought into SignalFire to do basically the development of all of the things that a founder would experience after they took our money. So what would we do for you after you kind of took on this capital? And the promise of being a founder's most valuable investor is a direct derivative of what it is that you're doing for them. So a lot of folks, what I recognized at that time, this was 2016, what I recognized was a lot of venture capital firms talked about recruiting. They still do today. And a lot of them talk about like how much value they add on the recruitment side. If you go and you interview the portfolio companies of those folks, the vast majority of them will tell you that, firm X, Y, or Z said X and actually did Y. And Y is generally not directly recruiting for their portfolio. And so for me, that was a delta. It was a gap that I figured that we could easily fill. I had a background in this thing. It was low-hanging fruit. We were a scrappy little team of 7 people at SignalFire at the time. We just raised our first fund. It was a very small $50 million seed fund. And what I was brought on to do was figure out what are the things that we can start to build that are going to enable us to garner that credibility. And then the credibility leads to super pro rata invitations for future rounds in your best companies. It leads to great referrals, founders talking to founders, leading to higher win rates when you're going to extend term sheets. And those things lead to good outcomes, great outcomes at times, which leads to your ability to raise additional funds, additional capital. And then our goal was take the additional capital and deploy it into additional resourcing that would enable this flywheel to continue. So when I started, it was all about how can I figure out, how can I diagnose within this portfolio of companies, who are the ones who are going to need my help the most? How can I identify the ways in which I can help them immediately? And how can I begin the relationship and influence them in such a way where not only will they take my call, take my meeting, but they'll listen to what I'm saying in the way that like they'll actually do the stuff that we're suggesting. A great example of this is, one of the very first companies that I started working on when I joined SignalFire. We had lost the seed lead to Frame.io. We lost it to Excel, and it was fine. At the time, we were just getting started, and we were just pleased to have an opportunity to have a bite at the apple. However, what we did was we made a handshake agreement with the founder, Emery, in that we made an agreement where we said, if we add more value than anybody else on your cap table, all we ask for is the opportunity to earn super pro rata in your future round, in the next round. And it's up to you. There's no obligation, whatever, but we're going to put in that work, and we want to make this happen. And so what I did was I went, flew out and met with Emery, figured out, like, here are the 2 to 3 things that you really need to focus on from now until the point where this next major milestone that you're trying to hit. Here are the things that we need to focus on. Here are the people that we need to recruit, and this is what they look like. Here's the places that they tend to come from. We collaborated on that effort. We recruited a couple of senior people. Those people wound up being there, basically from that point through their exit to Adobe. And really what that was all about, though, was just adding this value that was so clear to me. Like, you need these things. Let's go and recruit for these things. Let me help you to find and engage, close, and then onboard these people. And that's a singular example that we then magnified through time by coming up with systems, hiring more people that were capable of doing these things, expanding our programming from just recruiting into recruitment and talent strategy, into go-to-market, lead generation, into product strategy, PR and media. We have world-class experts that lead these programs today, and this is all just a continued manifestation of that very first vision of, we want to be a founder's most valuable investor. We're going to continue to hold that as our core mantra, and we're going to continue investing into programming that's going to enable us to do that as the firm continues to scale.
Totally. I like what you're using an example of Free.io. Like, why don't we talk about, I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about, like, let's say, what did they need back then, and how do you kind of like, where do you pull people who would want to join a startup? Because this is like very different than recruiting for Facebook, just because, startups typically don't really, the visions constantly are changing, and or like, not, the vision doesn't change, but like, it's more of like the approach is constantly changing. The people you need is like, today you need someone doing XYZ, tomorrow you need someone to doing like something else.
Yep.
How do you, like, I guess, like, what were the challenge that they had back then, and how do you kind of help them to solve them?
Yeah, good question. So what I'll do is I'll preserve the specifics in the people and the
Right, yeah.
roles. And what I'll say is that this will be relatively general advice for any company that is below 30 employees, but is
Mhm,
extremely, extremely true, and is extremely valuable.
mhm,
Identify the core areas where you're not necessarily exceptional.
mhm,
Hire people who are really excited to be exceptional at that thing. And generally speaking, they may not even have a core background in that thing.
mhm,
They're just super intelligent, curious, like their willingness to do stuff is off the charts, run through walls, all that stuff, right? You want to find as many of those people as you possibly can. And ideally, you're finding the ones who have a propensity to be really good in a particular category. And so that's what we did with Frame, and it worked out super well. I would say that is something that you could probably reverse engineer any successful company, and you're going to wind up seeing the exact same stuff. The people that are there for long periods of time, the people that really enabled an organization to get from point A to point B with velocity, without hiccup, kind of thing. Just a focus-driven effort. You're going to find the exact same thing at every company.
So where do you find this batch of people? Like, do you go on LinkedIn, and like, obviously, SignalFire is like famous for, helping founders recruiting and like, leveraging data to make a lot of decisions. But I wonder, like, what kind of things would you track on someone's resume? Just because, I've seen like people, let's say like the investors tracking, call it like YC founders, and then they rank the YC founders based on, what school they went to, or like experiences they had, or product they're building. So there's like, a lot of like really obvious benchmarks. But how do you kind of like through the resume, or like through the kind of like the robust like LinkedIn on steroid approach to like find people, like I guess like what kind of keywords you even need to put into the system to like find the right person, and how is it different than if I just browse through people on LinkedIn?
Yeah. So, boy, I think the answer to your question is that it's case dependent. So,
Mhm.
sorry.
I feel you.
But what I can say is try to try to think deeply about where the types of people that you want to bring into the organization may come from.
Mhm.
uh, Go out and interview the best people that are doing that thing today, so that you can get a clean perspective on what excellent looks like, and how they speak, how they frame things, how they think. And hopefully you can take that and translate that into how can I create, some sort of, search mechanism to find these people, at scale. The reality is, again, coming back to the 30 people and below an organization, um, you're most likely to find these diamonds in the rough through your network, and it's generally through talking to people that who you trust their perspectives, who you know that they're great. And it's this daisy chain of putting in the hard work to find the gold at the end of the rainbow. And so, that's really what it's about in that early stage. Then as you continue to grow, it becomes a combination of what I mentioned earlier. It's, you want to instill a recruiting culture into your business. It's so important. Everybody says this, almost, I mean, the best people are the ones who actually implement it. But having a recruiting mentality, a recruiting culture in your organization is so incredibly important to your long-term success. You want to do that, and you want to do that early. You want to find people that are excited to bring their friends into your organization. You want to find people that like are excited to go to hackathons and meetups, and like the places where these people are and are hanging out, and are excited to go and recruit those people into your org. That's where you want to spend the majority, I think, the majority of your time. The LinkedIn rat race, the sending emails to 1,000 people hoping that like you're going to get the one that is going to be the best for your organization. People do that. Sometimes it works. It's not what I would recommend for early stage companies to do, because it tends to be hit or miss, and you're the element that you're missing 100% of the time in those efforts is the direct the correlation touch point between somebody that I know who is great, knows this person, and vouches for them being great too. The probability of them being great is pretty high. And then it's really a function of, are they the right culture fit for your organization? Which, culture fit is this probably whole other podcast that I'm sure you'd want to have. But it's a really squishy topic. Ultimately what it comes down to is like core values and people being super excited to execute on your mission.
For sure. Let's say right now, you and I are running a AI company. We're building AI agents that can help us, let's say, draft emails or something I just made up. But okay, so how should like I as a founder, or like as a if you're SignalFire, you invest in my business, how would you like, I guess like what would be the question you ask me that I have to provide you answer with to get us started, to help us, maybe find like beyond, me and a technical co-founder, like, who else do we need on our team to help the business grow?
So let's unpack that a little bit. So you're a founder,
Mhm.
and you have a couple of people on your founding team. Is that right?
Yeah, let's say I just have like one co-founder, and then the co-founder is like a technical person,
Yep.
a technical friend, let's say. Just because I feel like most people just hire their friends in the very beginning, but maybe this person doesn't have what it takes to like eventually run the technical side. This
Yep.
is like on the other hand. So, at this point you raise some money. So like how would you kind of like proceed with this situation to help the startup hiring?
Um, I would say that the first and probably the most important thing to do is assess the core, 10 out of 10 competencies that you and your co-founder have,
Mhm.
and map that to what it is you're trying to accomplish over a given period of time. So
Mhm.
let's call it one fundraising round to another, right? So it's
Mhm.
a seed or a pre-seed to a Series A. Um,
Mhm.
so what you need to do is figure out what are the things that you're going to need to do as a business in order to get yourself to that point of Series A. So you say, I look back and I'm looking at a classic enterprise SaaS business. My goal is to have $1 million in ARR.
Mhm.
I want to have a product that is developed to a certain extent, and I want to have, you name your criteria, right? So then you take that, and then you look back and you say, okay, well, to what degree of confidence do I have that me and my co-founder can get us to that point? And what are the things that we need to do to complement ourselves in order to get us to that point within a reasonable period of time where we're not going to run out of money? And so that would be my advice: is like think deeply about what it is that you need. This is sort of a spoiler alert of sorts, but like if you're a founder and part of the calculus for determining what you need to be doing as a founder, if the vast majority of that is not maniacally focusing on product, maniacally focusing on recruiting, and maniacally focusing on your customers, if it's not those three things, you're probably missing something. Because at that stage, that's what everything really comes down to. And so, I would say like figure out how you need to complement yourself in order to get those three objectives accomplished and reaching those goals, and then find the right people who can help you to do that. Ideally, you find people who can do multiple things, who don't have a problem, working crazy hours and like are on the boat and are willing to do what it takes in order to get you to that key milestone. It's unfortunate, but the reality is most startups don't make it. And so your ability to find as many people as possible who are willing to do what it takes in order to help increase the likelihood of survival, that is going to be, sort of paramount to your long-term success.
How do you think about like what does a technical person do at the very beginning, and then what does the non-technical person do at the very beginning? Is it the non-technical person just do a lot of like customer research, like talking to the customer, and then like giving the feedback to the technical person who is building the prototype of the company? Or like how do you envision the team kind of like go from, a two-person team to, 4 people to 6 people? Should they just start with like hiring all the technical talent on product? Because sometimes like I go to like a VC firms like events or something, it's always kind of like recruiting event technically, or like even the tech startups or like people hosting some sort of like company event. The main goal was always like recruiting.
Yep.
But on the other hand, like how do you, like who are you recruiting, like who are you trying to recruit at the very beginning versus like, you know what type of engineer can really build the product? So how do you kind of like understand, um let's say like the startup like construction of like a good team at the beginning?
Um, Again, it's entirely case dependent on the business and
Mhm.
the core skill sets of the founders. What I will tell you is that what we like to focus on is what recruit can we help to identify and bring into the company that is going to be a game changer in some way.
Mhm.
Um, what we tend not to focus on very much is just sort of rank and file folks. we try to figure out what are the one or two recruits that you need for the business that are gonna be a step functional improvement for where you are today. You mentioned, hiring, product people. I would probably not encourage hiring product people at when you're two people, because you as the founder should be the product person. You should be the product person. You should be the chief salesperson. You should be the chief cheerleader and recruiter for the business. And if you're not those three things, you probably shouldn't be the founder. And so, that's something to encourage the audience here to maybe self-reflect on before going off and starting a business. You generally don't want to start a business and then go out and hire for the things that you should be excellent at as you're building that kernel component of a startup. And then, I would say, like, what are the things that you need the most? A lot of times today, as a real world example, the roles that people tend to look for that they don't have the core skill set in is, deep machine learning expertise. It's the AI component to everything that's getting built today. AI is sort of like all things. Generally speaking, you're probably not getting a whole lot of venture capital interest if the word AI is not baked into your pitch deck somewhere, right? And but that's just the reality. That's just sort of all software now. The differentiating factor is what capabilities do you have to leverage the state of the art? What do you need to complement yourself, or what do you need to bring to the organization to either leverage the state of the art or build the state of the art? And I would probably focus there in these like core product driven, engineering driven roles. That tends to be where you want to focus a lot of your time in the early days, because again, going back to the founder's role of being the chief product person, chief salesperson, chief cheerleader, that person should be doing those things and getting themselves through to the point where they have that first million in ARR. They have that, it's very, very important for founders to go through those motions, and to live and walk in those shoes before going off and hiring, quote unquote leaders to do those for their business.
Totally. I wonder, since like SignalFire always define yourself as like a fintech startup that are monetizing through like venture capital. So how do you think about growing your own team as SignalFire? So at the beginning, I would assume like from like the Frame.io era, you would really flew into like meet the startup founders. But nowadays, I'm sure like you have a team. And how do you kind of like scale your own function within the firm?
Good question. So for us, we have the good fortune of having an engineering, data science, and product team in-house. We've been building proprietary software since the foundation of the firm. And we've continued to leverage the core data sets and core algorithms and continue to iterate and improve on the algorithms themselves to help us scale the varying functions that we've built out. So recruiting, go to market, sales, lead generation, all those kinds of things. We're able to do that through our own proprietary system, and we're pretty good at it. So that has been a core component to us scaling. And then another piece to this is, and this dovetails directly into recruiting and scaling your business, is we've really focused on the word networks. And so, what do networks mean to us? What kind of networks do we have? What networks do we need to build? How do we complement various networks with net new networks? That kind of thing. And, network effects in the product and the startup world enable something to, grow exponentially. And in the world of venture capital, our hope and our general thesis is that creating networks that unto themselves have network effects, right? Because great people know great people, and that leads to all sorts of really good stuff if you're a venture capitalist. We've been thinking a lot about that and how to systematize that and how to leverage that in I don't want to say unique, but like leverage that to the best degree that we can. And for us, that's going to be a core piece to our scaling in this next evolution. You called us sort of a fintech dressed as a venture capital firm. I would say that's pretty accurate. We actually think of ourselves as a startup. You know, we kind of think of ourselves right now as a Series B stage startup in essence, where, you know, we've got product market fit. We've got, you know, a great motion going, and we feel like, you know, there's a ton of headroom in front of us to kind of fill in. And so, you know, the old you know, Jeff Bezos adage of day zero, day one, we kind of feel like it's that for us right now.
I love that. And I wonder, I really like that you're defining you guys are Series B startup. And I wonder when you're, I guess like when you guys are building the in-house, I guess like talent function or like talent database, like what would be the benchmark that's like surprising to like a regular human? You obviously you don't have to give out like any like crazy information here, but like it's more of like the, you know, what would you say like most people were missing when they're building out the talent function or like the database for to screen talent. So obviously I feel like nowadays like every VC firm have some sort of like database to screen talents, whether it's like, you know, like scraping on like, you know, whoever's leaving OpenAI yesterday and changing
Yep.
their title to Stealth. That's
Yep.
kind of like a really popular method right now. But what would you say were things that like people probably never thought of that is like a really interesting benchmark?
Yep. So people tend to err on the side of laziness. Not all people, but most people tend to err on the side of laziness and cutting corners to the extent where they don't recognize that they're cutting corners in the moment, but the realization is that they are indeed cutting corners. When it comes to profile assessment, a candidate assessment, I think that algorithms help get you they can help get you 60 to 80% of the way there. I think one of the problems that the industry faces right now are that like a lot of people are happy with that result set, saying that, oh, like this person got spit out of our algo, and so therefore I should go and recruit this person. And so I think that that's a huge mistake. I think that the value in recruiting really is that kind of last mile, really unpacking a person's career moves, motivations, personality, as it becomes a reflection of who they are and the likelihood that they'll be successful in either a startup capacity as a founder or an early stage employee. You know, OpenAI, as to use your example, at this you know state of the organization's growth, you know, I'm not personally convinced that there's a whole lot of, you know, talent that's going to spin out of OpenAI on the engineering side that's going to go off and, you know, start amazing businesses. Some of them will, but the vast majority of them won't. I mean, that's just the law of startups and successful outcomes. And so, you know, just because somebody got a job at OpenAI, and this was true for Google and Facebook, you know, Yahoo before that, you know, it's like, if these people worked at these companies, then they must be great. Well, what the reality is, like, they have a certain technical capability, or they have a certain capability that got them into an organization. So yes, they probably are, you know, good to great in those capacities. But that alone does not make them a great candidate, a great person to found a company, or to be an early employee in a company. So those kinds of things are where you really need to dig in, spend your time understanding core motivations, why somebody's doing something, like, you know, to the degree that you can understand their background before they even became who they are. You know, like, tell me about yourself when you were a kid, kind of thing. Like, what kind of trouble did you get into, or what kind of things did you do that that would be, you know, sort of indications of persistence and curiosity and you know, some degree of uniqueness. That's the stuff that makes people not fear conventional wisdoms, not fear the complexities of running through brick walls, working 24 hours a day to solve a problem. Like that's the kind of stuff that you really want to look for, especially in those early days. I would say that one of the challenges and the mistakes that a lot of people make through pattern matching is they say that somebody historically had done a thing, and so therefore I want to go recruit them to do that thing. The reality there is like if somebody had already done a thing and they're going to be excellent, they just by definition of the personality of the people that you're looking for, those people are not going to want to go back and do it again. And so things like that, I feel like are really important for folks to clue into and pay attention to. Hopefully that's it's a very long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully that provides a little bit of a window into how I think about stuff like that.
For sure. I wonder, like, I really like what you said about, like, people don't want to repeat what they have done at somewhere else.
Yeah.
And when but like on the other hand, like the startups are like, I would say like 90% of the people are still like trying to figure out, like, oh, you have built XYZ and at this place. And like I feel like you mentioned, that's a mistake. But what type of people should they be looking for to build that thing if it's not the person who already built something somewhere?
You look for core skill sets and capabilities. You look for people who are going to figure it out. I'll give you a specific example where if you are in need of a VP of engineering and you're a 30-person startup, arguably I'm not even sure you would need a VP of engineering at that stage, but let's say you do. And then you go and you look for the VP of engineering from your competitor or from a startup that did something similar to what it is that you're doing, and that person's been in their role for a year and a half or something. And you look at that company and you look at the growth of that company, and you're like, oh, of course they're looking to make a move, right? So they're going to come and they're going to join me. The reality is, why? If that person is indeed exceptional, which coming back to what we talked about earlier, all you should be looking for is exceptional. If that person is indeed exceptional, why didn't they demonstrate exceptionality in that last organization? Or if they did, what went wrong? Why did they join the organization in the first place? And so like things like that, I tend to give people some degrees of freedom. I tend to give people a pass one time. So if that happened one time and like made a mistake, like I get it. But if there's patterns there where like, oh, you were the VP of engineering at this startup, and then you were the VP of engineering at this startup, and you were there for a year and then a year and a half. And like those are the breadcrumbs that you should be paying very close attention to. What you really want is somebody who was probably a tech lead or an engineering, manager, and they manage 8 people, but like all of their people think extraordinarily highly of that person. They're academically astute. They're incredibly curious. They're willing to run through brick walls. Those people will evolve and they will grow into the world's greatest VP of Eng in the future. So you want to try to understand what those people look like in the now, and the likelihood that person will grow into the thing that you're looking for. And your chances of success there, I would argue, are going to be much higher than trying to find the person who did the thing at the thing and you're expecting them to do the thing again.
Do you so typically, how do you work with a bunch of startups, since SignalFire is getting like a lot bigger than the past 8 years? And like I'm sure, like, if you're just working on one-on-one to help every startup to recruit every single person, it's a lot more time consuming. So I have heard about, people would go to, let's say, like a company is shutting down, but there's a lot of really great talent. And then that's like a great way to kind of like find a group of talent together. But besides like those like more like obvious ones, like I guess, like how would you source talent and badge? Would you go to every hackathon, or Like, how do you kind of like source the person's like from like a technical perspective they can actually work, also from a culture perspective, how do you kind of like put them into buckets? Just because I feel like the culture thing, like you said, it deserves its own podcast. Like, you can't really tell if a person would be like a culture fit for XYZ company right off the bat, since like people are just like very different from each other.
And so your question is referencing how to recruit in batches.
Yeah, or like how do you keep the talent pool? Like I guess like how do you recruit for SignalFire startups? So like would it be like one-on-one? So like you need a VP of engineer, then we'll find a VP of engineer. Or would it be like you have a bunch of people already in the pool that's ready to go, or like that you already pre-vetted and
Yep.
then match them to someone?
Yep. It's a combination of those things. That goes back to the network effects that I was talking about a little bit earlier. So a big part of our effort internally is to make sure that we are connecting with and providing value to the community without any expectations at all at any given time, so that hopefully at some point when they're looking to make a move or we have something that could be really exciting, they'll pick up the phone and at least engage, kind of thing. Uh, I think the most valuable thing that we do from a recruitment side is push back on what a founder tends to think that they need. Um, you know, just the other day, one of our founders had come to us, and their business is 50 or 60 people, and they said, this came through the board. Hey, we're looking for a CRO, and we need the CRO to lead sales and customer success. And I'm kind of scratching my head and going like a CRO at 50 people. That doesn't sound right. Why would you need somebody at that level who, to break down the competencies of a CRO? It's like it's like a leadership position. It's a strategic leadership position where that person is probably not picking up the phone and hammering on customers and driving revenue and driving efficiencies through customer success directly. They're going to hire people to do that. That's sort of classic, senior executive behavior. And one of the things that we'll do, and one of the things that I think we're pretty good at, is pushing back on a founder. If they have an intuition that they feel like they need something, our goal is to make sure that we're really pressure testing their thinking, so that they know, well, if you bring on this kind of a person, it's going to lead to this, this, and this, and that doesn't sound like that's what you're looking to accomplish over this period of time. So, again, going back to the fact that startups are not, they don't succeed, they don't all succeed. You want to optimize for your chances of success at every single turn. We encourage people to think about a lot of these things from the people side, because chances are, if you make a bad hire at a senior level, or any level for that matter, it could potentially set you back, or even set the business on the wrong trajectory to failure. So those are the kinds of things that I feel like we are particularly good at, is making sure that we're pushing back and pressure testing thinking, and ensuring that there is alignment on the accomplishments that you're looking to achieve for a given objective.
For sure. I really agree with that. Like, like people may think they need one thing, but in the end of the day, they may just be needing something else. And from your experience building out your own team, I wonder, how do you since like SignalFire is like a startup on its own. So like how do you kind of recruit for your own team?
Good question. I guess kind of similarly, what we've gone through iterations in our recruitment cycle and looking for different kinds of people. We've spent periods of time looking for sort of the classic profiles. Even folks that I just like, when I described myself earlier, not fitting the classic profile of an early stage venture capitalist, we've fallen into those traps too, in looking for somebody who kind of like looks dresses and acts the part kind of thing. And the majority of time, we're not too far off. The thing that I feel like is going to separate us going forward is to not do that. Is to really challenge our thinking, is to really challenge our methodologies and ways of which we do business, and how that maps to the people that are going to thrive here, not just for the benefit of SignalFire, but really for the benefit of the founders that we're working for, and then in kind, the limited partners that have entrusted us with their capital.
Hi, Wayne, by the way. Wanted to say hi to Wayne. So I wonder, how do you think about, like, what would be the biggest mistake startups have made while hiring, besides, like, looking at things that, like, they don't need, or, like, doesn't know what they actually need, or, screen for the wrong characters. But, like, I guess, like, what would you say would be the biggest mistake? Is it, like, in terms of hiring?
Yeah, I would go back to what we said earlier about trying to pattern match and fit a person who had historically done something into a role that you're looking for, to have them essentially do that same thing. I would just highly encourage your listeners to really think about that piece there, and hire for capability rather than experience.
Totally.
Not an easy thing to do. It goes back to the thing that we again talked about earlier, in making sure that you talk to the people who are exceptional at doing the thing that you're trying to do, and understanding how they think, the words that they use, the way in which they conduct themselves, like the things that make them unique, and translate that into your conversations as you're talking to people who may not even necessarily have the experience in the role that you're hiring for, but they're saying those things. They're thinking in those ways. To me, that's the direction that I would encourage a lot of people to kind of go in. Again, if you're trying to create something that's transformational, if you want to go and work for Microsoft or Facebook or Google or whatever, round peg, round hole, boom, fit, go, kind of thing. But at the very primordial soup of a startup, in the chaos that exists there, you need to find people who probably haven't done the thing per se in the capacity that you're hoping that they grow into.
I have one. I want to be mindful of the time, so I have one real question, and then we'll jump into, like, quick fire round. So I wonder, let's say if you're a startup founder today, like, what kind of like, how should you kind of, like, put together your dream team? Like, I wonder, so for example, should you basically quiz yourself on, like, what you need, obviously, and then, like, do you use an Excel sheet to track every single engineer you've met in an Excel sheet, and then when you're recruiting for your own company, you started, like, hitting them up? Or how do you kind of, like, leverage what you have to actually build up the network that you were talking about, like, tapping into your own network slash just, I guess, like, building a good network and actually tracking them eventually when you're starting something that you would be able to kind of, like, tap into?
Yep. I think tracking and data capture in this capacity is extremely important. I think you should keep a diary of sorts, whether it's electronic or analog, where you're sort of documenting the impressions that you have, the things that you noticed, the even like reflections of yourself in an interview kind of thing, and pay very close attention to those things, and be maniacal about taking notes from your interviews, and leveraging that into A, making you a better interviewer, and B, also, like, what insights are you gleaning from that experience that are going to help you going forward. I think that to create your dream team, I think it starts with talking to the best people. So talk to your investors, talk to the founder cohorts that you respect. Talk to your best friends or maybe not your best friends, but people that you're acquaintances with, who that are exceptional at things like this that you're trying to accomplish. It all starts there. There is no silver bullet. It's not an easy thing to do. It shouldn't be an easy thing to do, frankly. because the harder it is, the more likely it is the people that are able to figure it out are going to create something that's truly great. And I think all of the greats have really paid close attention to that and have done all the things that we've talked about on this call. And I would encourage people to do the same. Take the breadcrumbs that the best of the best have left for you, follow in their footsteps.
Totally. Okay, so I have a quick 1-minute fire round for you. What's your favorite book?
I have many favorite books. One that I like and encourage founders to read is The Score Takes Care of Itself.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Sorry?
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
My dinner party. My dinner party would be good question. This is going to be such a squishy answer, but given the fact that I spend so much time working, at my dinner party would be my wife and kids.
I love that. Who made the biggest impact in your career?
The biggest impact in my career would be going all the way back to high school. Actually middle school, as I was trying to figure out whether or not I was going to really lean into soccer or not. And I had this coach who took me under his wing. His name was Hershey. And he just kind of taught me the value of pushing yourself beyond your limits. When you feel like you're reaching a limitation, push yourself further. He taught me this in 7th grade. And I'll never forget it because it kind of catapulted me through, my soccer career and then ultimately my professional career. And it's just this adage of recognizing that, when you feel like you come up against limitations, you can always blow through them. And somebody else has has done something greater than you. Like, don't hold yourself to limitations, kind of thing. And so, yeah, I was taught that pretty early. I lived it, and it's been hugely impactful for me.
I love that. I actually can totally relate to like sports helps you, or like just like even like some of like the most important lessons that you learn are always like at your youngest, just so that like I feel like I totally feel like sometimes like a teacher or like a coach or someone would be able to change your life or like teach you important life lessons like very very early.
Yeah.
And like you said, like you should always like push your limitations, and it's all about like a mindset. It's like a mind game in the end of the day. Where can we find you outside of work?
Oh boy. So I work out of our office in New York City. So I'm usually walking around the Flatiron all the time in the Nomad area. You can find me on LinkedIn. I don't do a whole lot of other social posting and social engagement. That's a whole nother blog or podcast, I should say, for kind of my philosophies there. But you can find me at SignalFire and any of our events. I'm usually there as well.
Amazing. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a great lessons. I feel I learned a lot about building a great talent team.
Thank you, Grace. Really appreciate the time.